Sunny Acres was just like its name. The sun always seemed to shine a little brighter there, the grass was always a little greener, and the people were always smiling. It was the kind of place where kids could ride their bikes down the street without a worry, where neighbors helped each other out with groceries, and where everyone knew everyone else's name. The houses in Sunny Acres were all different shapes and sizes, but they all had one thing in common, a big, welcoming front porch. People spent their evenings sitting on those porches, sipping lemonade, and chatting about their day. Fireflies blinked in the twilight, and the sound of laughter filled the air. Old Mr. Henderson, who lived at the end of the street, had the best garden in the whole neighborhood. He grew tomatoes as big as softballs and sunflowers that towered over his house. He always shared his bounty with his neighbors, leaving baskets of fresh vegetables on their doorsteps. Across the street lived the Millers, a young family with 2 energetic children. Their daughter, Lily, was especially bright and curious. She loved exploring the world around her and was always asking questions. Their son, Tom, was a bit quieter, but he had a heart of gold and was always ready to lend a helping hand. The bakery down the street, Sweet Surrender, was another Sunny Acres institution. The smell of freshly baked bread and cookies wafted through the air, drawing people in like moths to a flame. Mrs. Peterson, the baker, knew everyone's favorite treat and always had a warm smile for her customers. Even the mailman, Mr. Johnson, was part of the Sunny Acres family. He knew all the residents by name and always took the time to chat. He'd even bring dog biscuits for the neighborhood pups. And then there was Dave, the delivery man. He worked for Speedy Packages and was always cheerful and friendly. He knew everyone's schedule and always made sure to deliver packages right to their door, even if they weren't home. He was a familiar and trusted face in Sunny Acres, always ready with a wave and a smile. He seemed like the perfect fit for such a happy, peaceful place. He was always so helpful, carrying heavy boxes for the elderly and playing peekaboo with the toddlers. Everyone trusted Dave. That's what made what happened next so shocking. Sunny Acres was a place where people left their doors unlocked, where kids played unsupervised in the park, and where everyone felt safe. Until they didn't. The sense of security was about to be shattered, and the friendly atmosphere would soon be replaced by suspicion and fear. The wave of thefts was about to begin, and Sunny Acres would never be quite the same again. The first sign that something was amiss in Sunny Acres was Mrs. Gable's missing pie. Mrs. Gable was famous for her apple pies, and every Saturday, she baked one to share with her neighbors. This Saturday, she placed the freshly baked pie on her windowsill to cool, as she always did. But when she went to retrieve it an hour later, it was gone. At first, she thought maybe she'd forgotten where she put it. She searched the kitchen, the pantry, even the laundry room. But the pie was nowhere to be found. She asked her husband, Mr. Gable, if he had eaten it, but he swore he hadn't even seen it. They chuckled, thinking maybe a stray dog had gotten to it, though that seemed unlikely. The next day, Mrs. Peterson from Sweet Surrender noticed that a few of her prize-winning roses had been snipped from her garden. She initially dismissed it as kids playing around, but then she realized that the roses had been cut with a sharp pair of shears, not just pulled off. Then, little Tom Miller's favorite baseball glove disappeared from their front porch. He had left it there after playing catch with his dad, and when he went to get it the next morning, it was gone. He was heartbroken. These incidents, at first, seemed like isolated events, minor annoyances that were easily dismissed. A missing pie, some cut roses, a lost baseball glove, nothing to be too concerned about, right? But as the days went by, more and more small items began to disappear. A garden gnome from Mr. Henderson's yard, a wind chime from the Johnsons' porch, a bag of groceries left on Mrs. Rodriguez's doorstep, all gone without a trace. A growing unease settled over Sunny Acres. People started locking their doors, even during the day. They kept a closer eye on their belongings and were more cautious about leaving things unattended. The friendly atmosphere began to fade, replaced by a sense of suspicion and distrust. The evening porch chats became less frequent, and the sound of laughter was replaced by hushed whispers. Neighbors started looking at each other with questioning eyes, wondering if someone they knew and trusted could be responsible for the thefts. Even Mr. Johnson, the cheerful mailman, seemed a bit more subdued. He noticed the change in the neighborhood and felt a pang of sadness. He missed the friendly waves and the easy conversations. The disappearances were so random. It wasn't like someone was just stealing electronics or jewelry. It was always little things, almost like someone was just taking things on a whim. This made it even more unsettling. What kind of thief steals a garden gnome? The people of Sunny Acres were starting to feel violated. Their sense of security had been shattered, and they were desperate to find out who was behind the thefts and why they were happening. Little did they know, the answer was closer than they thought, hiding in plain sight, disguised as a friendly face. The missing items became the main topic of conversation in Sunny Acres. What started as isolated incidents soon turned into a neighborhood-wide mystery. Mrs. Gable, still bewildered by her missing pie, mentioned it to Mrs. Peterson at the bakery. Mrs. Peterson, in turn, shared her story about the snipped roses. That's when the realization dawned on them, they weren't alone. The next day, a group of neighbors gathered at Mr. Henderson's garden. He had offered to host a meeting, hoping to brainstorm solutions and share information. Everyone brought their own stories of missing items, creating a growing list of the stolen goods. "It's the baseball glove, too," Mr. Miller said, his voice filled with frustration. "Tom is so upset. He loved that glove." Mrs. Rodriguez chimed in, "And my groceries. I only left them on the porch for a minute while I unlocked the door. When I turned around, they were gone." As they compared notes, a pattern began to emerge. The thefts were happening during the day, mostly when people were at work or running errands. The items were small and seemingly insignificant, but the cumulative effect was a growing sense of violation. "It's like someone is just toying with us," Mrs. Gable said, shaking her head. "Taking little bits of our lives." Mr. Henderson, ever the practical one, suggested they start a neighborhood watch program. "We need to keep an eye out for anything suspicious," he said. "And we need to look out for each other." The neighbors agreed, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. They divided the neighborhood into zones and assigned teams to patrol each area. They exchanged phone numbers and promised to report any unusual activity. The suspicion, however, was also growing. They started looking at strangers with a wary eye, wondering if they could be the culprit. Even familiar faces were viewed with a bit of doubt. Could it be someone they knew? Someone they trusted? The thought was unsettling. Lily Miller, ever the observant one, listened intently to the adults' conversations. She noticed their worried expressions and their hushed tones. She decided to take matters into her own hands. She was determined to find the thief and restore peace to Sunny Acres. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was ready for the challenge. She started keeping a notebook, jotting down anything that seemed out of place or unusual. She became a junior detective, determined to solve the mystery of the missing items. She knew that the adults were doing their best, but she had a feeling that she could see things that they were missing. She was small and quick, and people didn't notice her as much. This would be her advantage. While the neighborhood watch focused on unfamiliar faces and suspicious strangers, Lily's mind kept drifting back to Dave, the delivery man. He was always so cheerful, always smiling, always ready with a friendly greeting. He knew everyone's name, their schedules, even their pets' names. He was the last person anyone would suspect. But that's exactly what made him so interesting to Lily. He had access to every house in Sunny Acres. He knew when people were home and when they weren't. He could easily walk onto a porch, grab a small item, and be gone before anyone noticed. Lily remembered seeing Dave delivering a package to Mrs. Rodriguez just a few minutes before Mrs. Rodriguez discovered her groceries were missing. She also recalled seeing him near Mr. Henderson's garden on the day the garden gnome disappeared. She started paying closer attention to Dave's deliveries. She noticed that he often lingered on porches, looking around as if he was admiring the flowers or the decorations. But maybe he was really looking for something to steal. The more Lily thought about it, the more Dave seemed like a plausible suspect. He was always so eager to help, always so willing to go the extra mile. Maybe that was just a cover for something more sinister. She knew she had to be careful. She couldn't just accuse Dave without any proof. She needed to gather evidence, to build a case that would convince the adults that he was the thief. She started tracking his delivery route, noting the times he visited each house. She also started asking subtle questions, trying to glean information without arousing suspicion. "Did you see anything unusual on Mrs. Gable's porch the other day, Dave?" she asked casually one afternoon as he delivered a package to her house. Dave smiled. "Just her beautiful flowers, Lily. She has the prettiest petunias in Sunny Acres." Lily nodded, pretending to be satisfied with his answer. But she knew he was being evasive. He hadn't mentioned the pie, even though it was the talk of the neighborhood. She continued her investigation, carefully piecing together the puzzle. She knew that Dave was the key to solving the mystery of the missing items. She just needed to find the right piece of evidence to expose him. She started thinking about how she could catch him in the act. She needed a plan, a clever trap that would reveal his true nature. She spent hours brainstorming, considering different scenarios and strategies. She knew that she couldn't do it alone. She needed someone she could trust, someone who would believe her even if it seemed crazy. She thought about her brother, Tom. He might be quiet, but he was loyal and dependable. She decided to confide in him. "Tom, I need your help," Lily whispered, pulling her brother into her bedroom. Tom, who was usually engrossed in a book, looked up, surprised by her serious tone. "What's wrong?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "I think I know who's been stealing things," Lily said, her voice barely audible. "It's Dave, the delivery man." Tom stared at her, his mouth agape. "Dave? But he's so nice." "I know," Lily said, "but I've been watching him, and something's just not right. He's always around when things go missing, and he acts weird." She explained her suspicions to Tom, recounting her observations and the subtle clues she had gathered. Tom listened intently, his initial skepticism slowly fading away. "Okay, I see what you mean," he said finally. "But how are we going to prove it?" "I have a plan," Lily said, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "We're going to set a trap." Lily's plan was simple but clever. They would place a package on their front porch, one that looked tempting but was actually filled with old newspapers. They would then set up a hidden camera to record anyone who tried to take it. "We need to make it look like a real package," Lily said, rummaging through her art supplies. She found a roll of colorful wrapping paper and a shiny red bow. "This should do the trick." Tom, being the more technically inclined of the two, was in charge of the camera. He found an old webcam that their dad had lying around and figured out how to connect it to their computer. He then carefully positioned the camera in a potted plant on the porch, making sure it had a clear view of the package. "No one will ever know it's there," he said, giving Lily a thumbs up. They waited anxiously for Dave to make his rounds. Lily kept peeking out the window, her heart pounding with anticipation. Finally, they saw his familiar delivery truck pull up to the curb. Dave hopped out of the truck, a smile on his face as he approached their house. He placed a real package on their doorstep, then glanced at the fake package sitting invitingly on the porch. He hesitated for a moment, then looked around to see if anyone was watching. That's when Lily knew her suspicions were correct. Dave was about to take the bait. Lily held her breath, her eyes glued to the computer screen. Tom squeezed her hand, his own excitement building. They were about to catch the thief red-handed. The hidden camera was now recording. Lily and Tom watched, hardly breathing, as Dave's every move played out on the computer screen. He placed the real package carefully on the doorstep, a genuine smile still plastered on his face. Then, his eyes shifted to the brightly wrapped decoy sitting just a few feet away. He paused. He looked down the street, then back at the package. He fidgeted, adjusting his cap. The smile seemed to falter, replaced by a flicker of something else, greed? Nervousness? Lily couldn't quite tell, but it was definitely a change. He took a step closer to the fake package, then another. He reached out, his fingers brushing against the shiny red bow. He hesitated again, his eyes darting around as if he expected someone to jump out and yell, "Gotcha!" The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Lily gripped Tom's hand tighter, her knuckles turning white. This was it. This was the moment they would either prove their suspicions or be forced to admit they were wrong. Dave finally made his decision. In one swift motion, he snatched the package from the porch and tucked it under his arm, obscuring it from view. He turned and hurried back to his delivery truck, his pace quickening with each step. He jumped into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and sped away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Lily and Tom stared at the screen in disbelief. They had done it. They had caught Dave in the act. He took it. He actually took it. Lily exclaimed, jumping up and down with excitement. "I can't believe it," Tom said, still in shock. "Dave, the friendly delivery man, is a thief." They replayed the footage several times, each time marveling at Dave's audacity and their own cleverness. They had gathered the evidence they needed to expose him. But what were they going to do with it? "We have to show this to Mom and Dad," Lily said, her voice filled with determination. "They need to know what's been happening." They carefully saved the video file and ran downstairs, eager to share their discovery. They burst into the living room, where their parents were reading. "Mom! Dad! You won't believe what we just found out!" Lily exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement. Their parents looked up, startled by their sudden entrance. They exchanged a worried glance. What had these two been up to? "We caught the thief," Tom announced, holding up the computer. "And it's someone you know." The look on their parents' faces was priceless. They were about to be blown away by the truth about the friendly delivery man. The truth about Dave. Mr. and Mrs. Miller exchanged a look of amusement and slight exasperation. "Okay, kids," Mr. Miller said, chuckling. "Who did you catch stealing cookies from the jar this time?" Lily rolled her eyes. "Dad, this is serious. We caught the real thief, the one who's been taking things from the neighborhood." Mrs. Miller raised an eyebrow. "Oh really? And how did you manage that?" Tom stepped forward and plugged the computer into the TV, displaying the video footage on the big screen. Their parents watched in stunned silence as Dave, the friendly delivery man, approached their porch, delivered a package, and then, after a moment of hesitation, snatched the brightly wrapped decoy package. That's Dave," Mrs. Miller stammered, her voice filled with disbelief. "I know," Lily exclaimed, her eyes wide with excitement. "He's the one who's been stealing everything." Mr. Miller watched the video again, his expression growing more serious with each replay. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Dave, the man he had often chatted with about baseball and the weather, was a thief. "This is incredible," he said finally, shaking his head in disbelief. "I never would have suspected him." Mrs. Miller was equally shocked. "He always seemed so nice, so trustworthy." "That's what makes him so good at it," Lily said, her voice filled with conviction. "He uses people's trust to his advantage." Mr. Miller turned to his children, his eyes filled with pride. "You two did an amazing job," he said. "You were so clever and resourceful." Mrs. Miller nodded in agreement. "We're so proud of you for figuring this out." But their praise was quickly replaced by a sense of concern. What were they going to do now? They couldn't just let Dave continue stealing from their neighbors. "We need to call the police," Mr. Miller said, his voice firm. "We have to report this." Mrs. Miller agreed. "And we need to warn the neighbors. They need to know who they're dealing with." They decided to hold a neighborhood meeting the next day to share the video footage and discuss what to do next. They knew that the news would shock everyone, but they also knew that it was important to take action. Lily and Tom felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing that they had played a part in solving the mystery of the missing items. They had restored peace to Sunny Acres, or so they thought. The next day, the neighborhood was going to change forever. The trust would be broken, and a new era of suspicion would come. The truth was out there, and there was no way of hiding it. The neighborhood meeting was held at Mr. Henderson's house, the largest in Sunny Acres. The atmosphere was tense, a mixture of shock, anger, and disbelief hanging in the air. Mr. Miller started by playing the video of Dave stealing the package. A gasp rippled through the crowd as Dave's image filled the screen. "We never would have suspected him," Mrs. Peterson said, her voice shaking. "He always seemed so friendly. He delivered a package to me just last week," Mr. Johnson, the mailman, added, his brow furrowed with concern. "I had no idea." Once the initial shock subsided, Mr. Miller encouraged everyone to check their own security cameras, if they had any. A few neighbors had recently installed cameras due to the rising number of thefts. Mrs. Gable was the first to find something. She rewound her camera to the day her apple pie disappeared. There it was, clear as day, Dave, walking up to her porch, glancing around, and then reaching for the pie on the windowsill. He quickly scurried away, the pie hidden under his delivery jacket. Next, Mr. Rodriguez checked his camera. He found footage of Dave taking his bag of groceries, just as he had described. The same pattern emerged, Dave delivering a package, looking around to make sure no one was watching, and then snatching the nearby item. The evidence kept mounting. Mrs. Peterson found footage of Dave snipping her prize-winning roses. Mr. Henderson discovered that Dave had been the one who had taken his garden gnome. One by one, the neighbors found confirmation of Dave's guilt. The anger in the room grew. The neighbors felt betrayed, violated, and foolish for having trusted Dave for so long. "He's been making fools of us all this time," Mr. Henderson said, his voice filled with bitterness. "He took advantage of our kindness and our trust," Mrs. Gable added, her eyes blazing with indignation. Lily and Tom, who were sitting quietly in the corner, felt a mix of emotions. They were proud of their accomplishment, but they were also saddened by the devastation that Dave's actions had caused. "What are we going to do?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. "What happens now?" Mr. Miller stood up, his voice filled with resolve. "We're going to turn all the evidence over to the police," he said. "And we're going to make sure that Dave is held accountable for his actions." The neighbors nodded in agreement, their faces set with determination. They were ready to fight back, to reclaim their sense of security, and to restore peace to Sunny Acres. They were going to do whatever it took to make sure that Dave never hurt anyone again. The investigation had just begun, and it was only a matter of time before Dave was found. He wouldn't be smiling for much longer. The next morning, a group of neighbors, led by Mr. and Mrs. Miller, gathered outside the Speedy Packages delivery depot. They had decided to confront Dave directly, before turning the evidence over to the police. They wanted to see his reaction, to hear his explanation, to understand why he had betrayed their trust. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation and anger. Everyone was eager to finally face the man who had disrupted their peaceful community. They waited for Dave to arrive for work. It wasn't long before his familiar delivery truck pulled into the parking lot. He hopped out, a cheerful smile on his face, completely unaware of the reception that awaited him. "Dave!" Mr. Miller called out, his voice firm and unwavering. Dave turned around, his smile faltering slightly as he saw the group of neighbors standing before him. He looked confused and apprehensive. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice laced with unease. Mr. Miller stepped forward, holding up a USB drive containing the video footage. "We know what you've been doing, Dave," he said, his voice filled with disappointment. "We know about the thefts." Dave's face paled. His eyes darted around, searching for an escape. He knew he had been caught. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, his voice barely audible. Mrs. Miller stepped forward, her eyes filled with sadness. "We have video evidence, Dave," she said. "We saw you stealing the package from our porch. And we're not the only ones. Other neighbors have footage of you taking their things too." Dave's shoulders slumped. He knew there was no use denying it any longer. He had been caught red-handed. "I can explain," he said, his voice filled with desperation. "Please, just let me explain." "We're listening," Mr. Henderson said, his voice stern but tinged with a hint of compassion. Dave took a deep breath and began to explain. He told them about his family's financial troubles, about the mounting bills and the looming threat of eviction. He said he had started taking small items, intending to sell them to make ends meet. He never meant to hurt anyone, he claimed. He just wanted to provide for his family. The neighbors listened in silence, their expressions a mixture of anger, disbelief, and pity. They couldn't condone his actions, but they could understand his desperation. "Why didn't you just ask for help?" Mrs. Gable asked, her voice filled with sadness. "We would have helped you." Dave hung his head in shame. "I was too ashamed," he said. "I didn't want anyone to know about my problems." The neighbors were faced with a difficult decision. They had caught Dave in the act, but they also knew about his difficult circumstances. What were they going to do? The decision was not an easy one. The group looked at each other, trying to decide what to do. Everyone was conflicted. He had betrayed them, but everyone understood how difficult the circumstances must have been to make him do what he did. What would be the right thing to do? Dave's confession hung heavy in the air. The neighbors looked at each other, their faces etched with a mixture of emotions. Some were still angry and felt betrayed, while others felt a pang of sympathy for Dave's plight. "My wife lost her job a few months ago," Dave continued, his voice cracking with emotion. "And then my son got sick. The medical bills piled up, and we couldn't keep up with the rent. I didn't know what else to do." He explained that he had initially intended to borrow the money, but his pride had gotten in the way. He was too ashamed to ask for help, too afraid of being judged. So, he had resorted to stealing, thinking he could get away with it without hurting anyone. "I know what I did was wrong," he said, his voice filled with remorse. "I'm so sorry for betraying your trust. I never meant to cause so much trouble." Mrs. Peterson stepped forward, her eyes filled with tears. "Dave, we're a community," she said, her voice soft but firm. "We would have helped you if you had just asked." Mr. Henderson nodded in agreement. "We all go through tough times," he said. "That's what neighbors are for, to support each other." Lily and Tom watched the scene unfold, their hearts filled with compassion. They had been so focused on catching the thief that they hadn't considered the reasons behind his actions. The neighbors began to discuss what to do next. Some argued that they should still call the police and press charges. Dave had broken the law and deserved to be punished, they said. Others argued for leniency. They believed that Dave's confession and his genuine remorse should be taken into account. They suggested giving him a second chance, allowing him to pay back what he had stolen and to make amends for his actions. The debate raged on, with no easy answers in sight. The neighbors were torn between their sense of justice and their desire to help someone in need. Finally, Mr. Miller spoke up, his voice filled with wisdom and compassion. "We can't condone what Dave did," he said. "But we can also recognize his humanity. We need to find a way to balance justice with mercy." He proposed a compromise. They would turn the evidence over to the police, but they would also write letters to the judge, explaining Dave's situation and asking for leniency. They would also offer to help Dave and his family get back on their feet, by organizing a fundraiser and helping his wife find a new job. The neighbors agreed to Mr. Miller's proposal, feeling that it was the fairest and most compassionate solution. They had found a way to hold Dave accountable for his actions while also offering him a chance to redeem himself. The mood shifted. The anger and resentment began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of hope and understanding. Sunny Acres was still a community, and they were determined to heal the wounds that had been inflicted and move forward together. They all felt relieved to have come to a conclusion. Everyone was ready to move forward and make sure the community stayed the great place that it was. The news of Dave's confession spread quickly through Sunny Acres. The community was divided. Some neighbors were still furious, unable to forgive Dave for betraying their trust and violating their sense of security. They felt that he should be punished to the full extent of the law, regardless of his circumstances. He stole from us. He made us feel unsafe in our own homes. Mrs. Gable exclaimed, her voice filled with anger. He deserves to pay for what he did. Others were more sympathetic to Dave's situation. They understood the desperation that had driven him to steal, and they believed that he deserved a second chance. They were willing to forgive him, especially since he had shown remorse and had promised to make amends. "We all make mistakes," Mr. Johnson, the mailman, said, his voice filled with compassion. "Dave is a good person at heart. He just made a bad decision." Lily and Tom noticed the division in the community. They saw the angry faces and heard the harsh words, but they also saw the compassionate gestures and heard the words of forgiveness. They realized that even in a close-knit community like Sunny Acres, there were different perspectives and different ways of dealing with difficult situations. The Millers worked hard to bridge the gap between the two factions. They organized a neighborhood gathering, hoping to foster understanding and empathy. They encouraged people to share their feelings and to listen to each other's perspectives. "We need to remember that we're all neighbors," Mr. Miller said, his voice filled with wisdom. "We need to support each other, even when it's difficult." The gathering was tense at first, but as people began to share their stories and their feelings, the atmosphere began to soften. The angry neighbors started to see Dave as a human being, not just a thief. The sympathetic neighbors started to understand the pain and the fear that Dave's actions had caused. Slowly but surely, the community began to heal. The neighbors started to forgive Dave, not condoning his actions, but understanding the circumstances that had led him to steal. They realized that holding on to anger and resentment would only hurt themselves and their community. They began to focus on helping Dave and his family get back on their feet. They organized a fundraiser, collecting donations to help with the medical bills and the rent. They helped Dave's wife find a new job, using their connections and their resources. Sunny Acres was still a community, and they were determined to overcome the challenges they faced and to move forward together. They were all going to help Dave and his family. The sense of community had returned. Everyone felt that Sunny Acres was on the right track again. There was no more anger, just hope. Despite the community's efforts to show compassion, Dave still had to face the consequences of his actions. Speedy Packages, upon learning about the thefts, immediately terminated his employment. They couldn't afford to have someone working for them who had betrayed the trust of their customers. Dave understood their decision. He knew he had made a mistake, and he was prepared to accept the consequences. He was devastated to lose his job, but he knew that he had brought it upon himself. The police also launched an investigation into the thefts. They collected the video evidence from the neighbors and interviewed Dave. He cooperated fully with the investigation, admitting to his crimes and expressing his remorse. The district attorney decided to press charges against Dave for theft. He faced the possibility of jail time, but the neighbors of Sunny Acres rallied behind him. They wrote letters to the judge, explaining Dave's situation and asking for leniency. They emphasized his remorse, his willingness to make amends, and his commitment to providing for his family. The judge took the neighbors' letters into consideration. He also considered Dave's lack of a prior criminal record and his cooperation with the investigation. He ultimately decided to sentence Dave to community service and probation. Dave was relieved to avoid jail time, but he knew that he still had a long road ahead of him. He had to find a new job, pay back what he had stolen, and rebuild his reputation. The neighbors of Sunny Acres continued to support him. They helped him find odd jobs, they donated to his family's fundraiser, and they offered him words of encouragement. Dave was grateful for their support. He knew that he had a lot to prove, but he was determined to earn back their trust. He started volunteering at a local soup kitchen, helping those less fortunate than himself. He also spent time talking to young people, sharing his story and warning them about the dangers of making bad choices. Slowly but surely, Dave began to rebuild his life. He learned a valuable lesson about the importance of honesty, integrity, and asking for help when you need it. He also learned about the power of community and the importance of forgiveness. The consequences of Dave's actions were severe, but they also led to a positive transformation. He had made a mistake, but he had also learned from it. He was determined to make a positive contribution to society and to earn back the trust of the people he had hurt. He felt he had to show the community that he was grateful for their compassion. He knew he would never be able to deliver packages in Sunny Acres again, but he was determined to show everyone that he was a changed man. The hard work had just begun. He felt he had to show everyone that he deserved a second chance. The events that transpired in Sunny Acres served as a stark reminder that even in the friendliest of communities, vigilance is essential. The neighbors had learned a valuable lesson about the importance of being aware of their surroundings and taking precautions to protect their property. They realized that their trust in Dave had blinded them to the possibility that he could be stealing from them. They had been so used to his friendly demeanor and his helpful nature that they had never suspected him of any wrongdoing. The thefts had shattered their sense of security and had forced them to reevaluate their assumptions about trust and community. They realized that it was important to be friendly and welcoming, but it was also important to be cautious and to protect themselves from potential harm. The neighbors started taking steps to improve their security. They installed security cameras, they locked their doors, and they kept a closer eye on their belongings. They also revived the neighborhood watch program, taking turns patrolling the streets and reporting any suspicious activity. They also learned the importance of communication and community involvement. They realized that if they had been more open with each other and had shared their concerns earlier, they might have been able to prevent the thefts from escalating. The events in Sunny Acres also taught them about the importance of empathy and compassion. They learned that even when someone makes a mistake, it's important to try to understand their circumstances and to offer them support. They realized that Dave was not a bad person at heart, but rather someone who had made a series of poor choices due to desperation. They were grateful that they had been able to help him turn his life around and to give him a second chance. The experience had changed Sunny Acres, but it had also made it stronger. The neighbors had learned valuable lessons about trust, security, community, and forgiveness. They were determined to use those lessons to build a better and more resilient community. The children of Sunny Acres also learned a valuable lesson. Lily and Tom learned that even adults can make mistakes, and that it's important to speak up when you see something wrong. They also learned that even the smallest person can make a big difference. They also learned that trust is earned, not given. The thefts in Sunny Acres had been a difficult and painful experience, but they had also served as a catalyst for growth and change. The community had emerged stronger, more resilient, and more compassionate than ever before. They were ready to put what happened behind them and move on to a brighter future. They knew that Sunny Acres would continue to be a great place to live. The bad times had passed. Sunny Acres slowly began to heal and recover. The neighbors worked together to improve security and rebuild trust. They knew it would take time and effort, but they were determined to restore their community to its former glory. The Neighborhood Watch program was revitalized, with more neighbors participating and taking their patrols seriously. They communicated regularly, sharing information and reporting any suspicious activity. They organized community events, such as block parties and potlucks, to foster a sense of togetherness and to rebuild the bonds that had been strained by the thefts. They also started a buddy system, pairing up neighbors who lived alone or who were elderly, to provide them with extra support and companionship. The neighbors also focused on improving their communication. They created a neighborhood email list and a social media group, to share information and to stay connected. They also held regular meetings to discuss community issues and to brainstorm solutions. They also took steps to help prevent future thefts. They installed better lighting on their streets, they trimmed overgrown bushes and trees, and they encouraged each other to report any suspicious activity to the police. The Millers played a key role in the recovery process. They were always willing to lend a helping hand, to offer words of encouragement, and to organize community events. They also made a point of reaching out to Dave and his family, offering them support and friendship. Lily and Tom continued to be active members of the community. They volunteered their time at the local soup kitchen, they helped elderly neighbors with their chores, and they organized activities for the neighborhood children. Slowly but surely, Sunny Acres began to regain its sense of security and its sense of community. The neighbors started to trust each other again, and the atmosphere of suspicion and fear began to dissipate. The sound of laughter returned to the streets, the porch chats became more frequent, and the fireflies blinked brighter than ever before. Sunny Acres was once again a peaceful, friendly, and welcoming community. The recovery process was not easy, but it was worth it. The neighbors had learned valuable lessons about trust, security, community, and forgiveness. They had emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. The events in Sunny Acres had served as a reminder that even the best of communities can face challenges, but that with hard work, determination, and a commitment to each other, anything is possible. The sun seemed to shine brighter than ever before. Sunny Acres was back, better than ever. It was once again a wonderful place to live. The neighbors had come together to ensure that Sunny Acres was great again. The community spirit was strong and would remain strong for many years to come. The future was bright. Throughout the entire ordeal, Lily emerged as a true hero. Her bravery, quick thinking, and determination had been instrumental in solving the mystery of the thefts and in bringing Dave to justice. The neighbors praised her for her sharp mind and her unwavering commitment to doing what was right. They recognized that she had been the driving force behind the investigation, and they were grateful for her efforts. "Lily, you're a true detective," Mr. Henderson said, patting her on the head. "You have a gift for solving mysteries." Mrs. Peterson added, "You're so brave and clever. We're lucky to have you in Sunny Acres." The Millers were incredibly proud of their daughter. They had always known that she was special, but they had never realized just how capable she was. "Lily, you're an inspiration to us all," Mr. Miller said, hugging her tightly. "You showed us that even the smallest person can make a big difference." Mrs. Miller added, "We're so proud of your courage and your compassion. You have a bright future ahead of you." Lily was honored by the praise and the recognition, but she was also humble and grateful. She knew that she couldn't have done it without the help of her brother, Tom, and the support of her family and her neighbors. "It wasn't just me," she said, her voice filled with sincerity. "We all worked together to solve the mystery and to help Dave." Lily continued to be an active member of the Sunny Acres community. She used her skills and her intelligence to make a positive impact on the world around her. She organized community cleanups, she tutored younger children, and she volunteered her time at the local animal shelter. She also became an advocate for honesty, integrity, and compassion. She spoke out against bullying and discrimination, and she encouraged others to stand up for what is right. Lily's story became an inspiration to children and adults alike. She showed them that even in the face of adversity, it's possible to make a difference. She proved that with courage, intelligence, and a commitment to doing what is right, anyone can be a hero. Sunny Acres was a better place because of Lily. Her bravery and quick thinking had not only solved a mystery but had also brought the community closer together and had inspired them to be more compassionate and more understanding. The sun continued to shine brightly on Sunny Acres, a testament to the resilience and the spirit of its people. And Lily, the little hero, continued to shine just as brightly, a beacon of hope and inspiration for all. The tale of Sunny Acres had a happy ending. The end.